Easter Sunday was not just the end of a story, it was the beginning of something much bigger. Something that changes everything. Did you know that the true victory of Jesus is not just in what he did, but in what it means for you today? Stay with me until the end and discover how the resurrection can transform your life in ways you never imagined. Easter Sunday has arrived, and with it, a new dawn. It is not just another day, but the first of all days, the beginning of a new reality for humanity. What seemed like the end now reveals itself to be the beginning. The cross, which once seemed to be the end of history, is now the bridge to a new life, to a new understanding of God's love and power. The veil has been torn, and the world will never be the same again. It was dawn, and the first rays of sunlight were touching the hills of Jerusalem, but in the hearts of the people, a shadow of hopelessness still loomed. Jesus' death on the cross was still fresh in their memories. His followers were bewildered, filled with pain and doubt, unsure of what to do next. Yet, while they sat in the silence of mourning, heaven was already celebrating. Jesus' resurrection was not just a physical event, but a cosmic spiritual event that changed the history of all creation. Imagine the silence of that Sunday morning. Nothing spectacular seemed to happen. The world went on as if nothing had changed, but something extraordinary was already happening. God had fulfilled his promise, and now, in the silence of the tomb, life was being reborn. Jesus' resurrection was not yet visible, but the world, albeit invisibly, was being restored. And herein lies the secret of Sunday. Before there was the vision of the miracle, there was the silence of expectation. Like the hearts of Mary and the disciples, the world was waiting. The pain and mourning were becoming almost palpable, but deep down, a new reality was already being gestated. Easter Sunday did not come immediately, but was preceded by a period of profound silence and uncertainty. For us today, this reality is an invitation. The Lord often acts in silence. He does not rush. He does not expose himself before the time. When all seems lost, when circumstances do not match the promise, that is when God's power begins to manifest itself. God's silence is not an absence of action, but rather preparation for what is to come. This first chapter of Easter Sunday teaches us to trust, even when we see nothing happening. Even in the silence, something great is in process. We may not understand what God is doing now, but we know that the promise is certain. Resurrection Sunday always comes, even if the night seems too long. Easter Sunday brought a new dawn, but Christ's victory was still invisible to the eyes of the world. The streets were empty, the disciples were astonished, and no one seemed to notice what was happening. The resurrection of Jesus, the greatest triumph in all history, was not accompanied by a public spectacle or a great immediate revelation. The world continued to turn, people went about their daily lives, and the Roman Empire had not been shaken. But in the spiritual realm, the victory was already accomplished. What do we do when God's promises are fulfilled, but everything around us seems to remain unchanged? When pain and struggle still persist, when fear and doubt seem to be stronger than hope, it is difficult to understand that victory has already been won. This was the scenario experienced by the disciples on Sunday morning. They did not see anything different. They did not realize at first that death had been conquered and that the promise had been fulfilled. But God's victory does not depend on our immediate perception. The resurrection did not require a great visible event, a spectacle that caught everyone's attention. The victory was already there, silent, invisible to human eyes, but completely real on the spiritual plane. Jesus had conquered death, pain, and sin, but this was not something that the world could perceive instantly. Many times, in our own lives, we face moments when God's victory seems invisible. We are praying, seeking, waiting, but nothing changes around us. Difficulties remain, problems are not resolved, and suddenly we wonder if there really is anything new. God's victory, as on Easter Sunday, may seem invisible, but it is already in action. It is important to understand that, many times, spiritual victory manifests itself before any external change. God works from the inside out, in the silence of the heart, in the small decisions, in the subtle changes that occur in our mind and soul. The fact that you do not yet see the victory in your life does not mean that it has not happened. Many times, the miracle is underway, but it needs time to be revealed. It begins in the invisible before it becomes visible. This chapter challenges us to trust in what God has done, even when we don't see anything happening right away. Christ's victory on Easter Sunday was not instantly visible, but it was completely real and definitive. In a similar way, our spiritual victories can begin quietly, invisible to our eyes, but very real to God. On that first Easter Sunday, heaven had already declared victory, but the world did not yet know it. And so, God chose someone to witness the greatest revelation in history: Mary Magdalene. A woman. Someone considered marginal by many, ignored by religious structures, and despised by the society of the time. But it was she, precisely she, who became the first witness to the resurrection. This tells us something profound about the character of God. He does not choose the most influential, the most respected, or the most prepared according to human criteria. He chooses broken hearts, people transformed by grace, men and women who have already experienced the power of redemption. Mary Magdalene, once possessed by 7 demons, had been completely restored by Jesus. She knew the power of deliverance. She loved him, and it was this love, not status, that put her at the forefront of the miracle. While the disciples were still hiding, fearful, locked in their homes, Mary went to the tomb. She was moved not by logic, but by devotion. She did not expect to find a resurrected body, but she went anyway. And it is in this faith, even without understanding, that she encounters the unexpected. The empty tomb, the angels, and finally, the resurrected Christ himself. But look, she does not recognize him right away. She confuses Jesus with the gardener. This teaches us that the presence of God can be right in front of us, but our eyes, still marked by pain or logic, may not see him. Jesus then calls her by name, Mary, and it is at the moment when she hears her name from the Master's mouth that she recognizes him. There is profound power when God calls us by name, when he reveals himself in a personal way. And Mary, who until then had been crying, becomes the first preacher of the gospel of the resurrection. Jesus entrusts her with the mission of announcing to the disciples that he is alive. This is tremendous. God still chooses the unlikely to carry his glory. He still calls by name those whom the world has discarded. Mary Magdalene becomes a symbol that resurrection is not for the perfect, but for those in love. And it is in the broken and available heart that Jesus reveals his glorious presence. If you feel small, forgotten, or unworthy, remember, God may be preparing you to be the messenger of a new life. 2 disciples were walking along, heads down, disappointed. Their steps carried the weight of a frustrated hope. They had believed that Jesus was the Messiah, the one who would free Israel. But now, everything seemed to be over. The Master had died. The dream was shattered. Their faith was shaken. They were on the road to Emmaus. But in reality, they were going in the opposite direction to Jerusalem, the place where God was about to do something extraordinary. And it is precisely on this path of escape, doubt, and confusion that Jesus appears. The resurrected Christ joins them as an ordinary traveler. And even though he is so close, they do not recognize him. This is deeply symbolic. How many times have we walked with Jesus by our side, but our eyes are prevented from seeing him because of the pain? Jesus does not impose himself. He does not interrupt with power, nor does he reveal himself immediately. He asks, "What are you talking about?" He wants to hear their pain. He wants to enter into the process. This teaches us something powerful. Jesus walks with us even in our questions. He is not offended by our sincere doubts. On the contrary, he welcomes them. The disciples then confess, "We were hoping it was him." This is a phrase that echoes in the hearts of many to this day. We were hoping the miracle would happen. We were hoping the healing would happen. We were hoping the marriage would be saved. And when reality seems to frustrate these expectations, our hearts grow cold and our feet turn away from the promise. But Jesus, with patience and wisdom, begins to explain, from Moses to the prophets, everything that the scriptures said about the Messiah. He disciples them along the way. He rekindles their faith through the word. And only later, when breaking the bread, do their eyes open. They realize, it was him all along. What changed? The revelation came in intimacy, around the table, in the breaking of bread, in the relationship. And immediately, hearts that were once weary and disillusioned now burn again. And even though it is night, they rush back to Jerusalem, full of fire and conviction. This chapter shows us that the presence of Jesus never leaves us, even when we do not see him. He walks with us in the midst of pain, disappointment, and doubt. And often, It is only at the end of the journey that we realize that He has been with us all along. That Sunday night, while some witnessed the resurrection, others were still immersed in fear. The disciples were locked away, hidden, with the doors closed. It was not just a physical fear of the Jewish leaders. It was an existential fear. Fear that they had believed in vain. Fear of the future. Fear of persecution. Fear of being next. How many times have we locked ourselves away like this? Not with wooden doors, but with emotional, spiritual doors. We close ourselves off from the inside. Out of pain, doubt, shame, disappointment. We create internal fortresses that no one can cross. And we convince ourselves that we are alone. But it is in this environment filled with fear and silence that something incredible happens. Jesus appears in their midst. He does not knock on the door. He does not demand that they open it. He simply enters. Because there is no emotional barrier that can stop Him. There is no fear too deep for Him to cross. He is the God who breaks through walls to reach wounded hearts. And His first word is not a rebuke. It is, "Peace be with you." What a powerful word. Peace when everything seems confusing. Peace when the soul is at war. Peace even with closed doors. The presence of Jesus transforms the environment. Where there was fear, now there is presence. Where there was tension, now there is tenderness. Where there was silence, now there is comfort. Jesus then shows His wounds. He does not hide the marks of the cross. He reveals that victory came with scars. This teaches us something profound. Our wounds do not disqualify us from the mission. They give us the credentials. It was with marked hands that He commissioned the disciples. "As the Father sent me, I send you." Jesus does not wait for us to be completely healed to use us. He enters into our fears, shows us His scars, and sends us anyway. Because the gospel is not about perfection, it is about presence. It is about a Savior who enters even when we do not have the strength to leave. Maybe today you are locked inside yourself, fearful, with doubts, feeling like you have failed. But Jesus does not depend on your strength to get close. He comes, He enters, He says, "Peace." And that changes everything. Don't underestimate what God can do even in a closed setting. Sometimes the greatest encounters with Jesus happen out of the spotlight, locked away, but not alone. After Jesus appears in the midst of fear, something begins to change in the hearts of the disciples. The atmosphere of paralysis is broken. The atmosphere of uncertainty gives way to a new certainty. He is alive. He has overcome. And now, something new begins. But Jesus does not rise again just to comfort. He rises again to commission. The cross was not the end of the mission. It was the foundation of a new beginning. It is as if He were saying, "Now that everything has been accomplished, it is time for you to continue what I began." And that is exactly what He does. He breathes on them and declares, "Receive the Holy Spirit." This is one of the most profound and prophetic scenes in the entire Bible. Jesus' breath recalls the breath of God in Genesis, when man became a living soul. Now, Jesus breathes again, and this time it is to form a new man, a new creation, a new humanity with a new mission. The mission is clear: to go, to proclaim, to free, to forgive, to transform. But it cannot be done with the strength of one's arm. That is why, before any sending, there is a breath. Because the breath represents empowerment, presence, dependence on the Spirit. Here is the truth. The same Jesus who died for us also trusts us to continue the kingdom. He knew of the disciples' failures. Peter had denied. Thomas had doubted. Everyone had fled. But still, He calls them. He sends them. He believes in them. And this teaches us something powerful. It doesn't matter where you have been or what you have done. God still wants to write a new story with you. The mission continues. His breath is still available. The world still needs to hear. Many think that the resurrection was the end of the story. But, in fact, it was the starting point. What seemed like a full stop was just a divine comma. From that moment on, the church would be born. The gospel would spread throughout the world. Thousands would be healed, saved, restored, all because He was resurrected and entrusted this mission to ordinary people with transformed hearts. Today, this mission is ours. The story He began must continue to be written in the streets, in homes, in conversations, in attitudes. You are still part of this story. You are still in the plan. His breath is still upon you, and the mission is still ongoing. The resurrection of Jesus was not a silent event. Even though it happened at dawn on an ordinary Sunday, with few witnesses and no spotlights, its echo has crossed the centuries. It was not just a victory over death. It was the inauguration of a new reality, a world where life has the last word. But why does this matter so much? Because fear still tries to shout loudly. Fear of failure, rejection, abandonment, loss, death. We live in a generation surrounded by the noise of uncertainty, bad news, constant threats, emotional and spiritual insecurity. It is easy to live trapped inside an interior upper room with locked doors, as the disciples were. But it is in this place that Jesus still appears. The echo of the resurrection is not just historical, it is existential. It is Jesus entering the midst of fear and saying, "Peace be with you." He does not remove the scene. He changes the atmosphere. He transforms hearts. Fear does not disappear because everything is perfect. Fear loses its power because now we have the presence. Life overcomes fear when we decide to believe, even without seeing. It was like that with Thomas. It was like that with Mary in the garden. It was like that with the disciples on the road to Emmaus. And it is like that with us today. Faith is not an escape from reality. It is the certainty that the deepest reality is invisible. Jesus is alive and is with us. The resurrection is the sign that nothing, absolutely nothing, can separate us from God's love. Not sin, not shame, not the past, not the future, not the cross, not the tomb. Nothing. Because He won. And if He won, we will win too. This is the echo that needs to continue. An echo that passes from mouth to mouth, from generation to generation, from heart to heart. A news that refuses to be silenced. Life has won. May this Easter Sunday not be just a distant memory. May it be a personal new beginning. May the echo of the resurrection reverberate within you, breaking down walls, healing traumas, resurrecting dreams. Because Jesus lives. And because He lives, you can face tomorrow. The tomb is empty. The mission continues. And fear has already lost. Life has won. Hope has been resurrected. Now it's up to you. What will you do with this truth? If this word spoke to your heart, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to remember that Sunday always comes. The tomb is empty, and Jesus is alive. The story did not end on the cross. It began again with the resurrection.